Hi guys, Steve Good here with the Scrollsaw Workshop. The other night I posted the pattern on my blog for this little small church mini clock, and I thought I would go through tonight and give you some tips on the assembly instructions. You can download this pattern from www.scrollsawworkshop.blogspot.com. And with that, let's go ahead and get into some of the tips for putting this thing together. The first thing I did is came up with my cut list, and in this case I have some 3/4 inch. I actually ended up changing this to walnut for the finished project, but 3/4 inch for the pews. These three boards are all 1/4 inch thick, happen to be cherry, and I've laid out all my pieces for the walls and the different parts that need to be 1/4 inch. Over here I have some 1/8 inch thick hardwood, and I've got my pieces that need to be 1/8 inch thick on that board. Then what I did is I took the pieces to my table saw and cut the pieces out to fit each of the patterns, and went ahead and laid out all my patterns on their individual pieces to have them ready to glue up. I went ahead and glued up all the patterns, cut out all the, drilled all the interior holes and cut out all the pieces. There's a couple of pieces here missing that I added later, some of the gingerbread fretwork on the front of the church, and a couple of little small items like the picture that I ended up putting in to hung on one of the walls. But anyway, go ahead and get all the pieces cut out. The only difference in this picture and what I ended up actually doing is these are the two ceiling pieces for the main church building, and I did actually end up throwing these out and starting over. The pattern will show this cutout right here, but I'm going to show you a technique for measuring that as you put the building together that makes it easier and a better fit than just going ahead and cutting it out up front. I started out with the tower of the church, and this is the tower, not glued together yet, but just all pieced together and ready to glue together. And you'll notice that the side walls are mounted in between the front and back wall of the tower. That's very important to make things fit. To keep this project simple, everything's just a simple butt joint, which is what I have here. I've gone ahead and set the frame up, and the frame sits on top of the step. So that's all there is to the tower. Very simple little project to put together there. Here I have everything just setting, nothing glued up yet, everything just setting, checking for fit. You can see I've got the side walls and the back wall and these two little front walls all just sitting here, and all I was doing here was just checking everything to make sure everything was going to fit together like I had planned. Now I went ahead and cut out all the window frames and installed them on all the walls. Went ahead and glued those together. And here I've started to actually glue things together. So I'm putting everything together. I've got the glue on all the joints, and I'm ready to square it up. And I used my little right angle here to make sure that as it dried, all the walls were nice and straight. And that's important to do because the ceilings won't fit well, or the roof won't fit well if you don't have it pretty straight. So go ahead and get it squared up while you're letting it dry. Now I'm getting ready to start on the roofs, and to cut this 45-degree angle at the peak of the roof, I used my sander, which it works pretty well if you take your time. You could have obviously have cut this on your table saw, this 45 right here, but it's actually quicker to just set up to use it on, to do it on the sander. And again, as long as you use your right angle gauge here to make sure you stay square, you can do a pretty good job of getting a nice 45. Now, after I cut out the first roof pieces, I found out that they didn't fit quite as well as I wanted, so I decided to start over. And here what I'm doing is I'm just taking the roof, in this case the right side roof, setting it on the walls and actually putting marks right here and right here where I needed the pieces to be. Now I do already have the 45-degree angle up here at the top. That just makes it easier to get that done first. Now what I'll do is take it back over to the scroll saw after I've marked from this edge and this edge of the building down here. This will be just a straight cut, but you'll see here in the next photograph that this has to be a 45 also. And this 45 I cut on the scroll saw, and I simply, in my case, tilted the head to 45 degrees. Depending on the saw you use, you may have to tilt the table, but you want this cut right here to also be at a 45, and you'll see in the next photo here what it's supposed to look like. And here, now this happens to be the left side roof, but same thing on the left and the right. They're just opposites. You can see I've got the 45 here that I made with the sander, and down here I've got the 45 that I cut at the scroll saw. And again, you could cut this over at your scroll saw as long as you do a pretty good job of keeping it a nice straight line. So we have the 45 here, the 45 here, and this is just a 90-degree cut right here. So there's the left side roof finished and ready to be glued on. And of course I've done that with both sides of the roof, and here I am gluing on the right side roof, and you can still see my marks where I measured everything out right there. So I've got that side glued on. Now I'm going back and I'm doing the same measurements, where I'm taking this measurement right here, and again I'm going to do exactly the same thing. The only difference is, rather than tilt my saw to the other side to cut out this 45-degree angle, which was just an extra step I didn't want to use, so I just drilled an interior 45-degree hole here, and instead of coming in from the end and working my way over, I'm going to come from the middle and work my way out. And here the left side of the roof is being installed on the church, and I just used a little tape to hold things together while the glue dried. This glue is strong. Today's glues are strong enough that you don't need a lot of clamping pressure on any of these pieces. So I just pretty much held them in place until they dried. And there you can see I've got most of the church all glued together and ready to start on some of the interior pieces. I did go ahead and add this gingerbread fretwork around the two front gables of the church. Now what I decided to do was put a picture of the Last Supper at the back of the church. So here you can see I've got a small 1/8 inch thick piece of wood that I've used spray adhesive to spray the back of the picture and apply it to this wood. I've got my framing pieces cut out. Here I have everything glued together, just a simple picture. And I went ahead and glued it to the back of the church, and I think this dimension right here is about 1.5 inches. You want it up high enough that you can see through the windows and through the front door and see it behind the preacher. Here's the preacher put together with his little pulpit all glued together and ready to be glued to the base. The size of the base is in the pattern. I did use a round over bit to round over the edges. Here I've got the pulpit glued to the base, and I basically would just set the church on and off of the base until I found the spot to glue it down. These little pieces that I have glued on here are what keeps the church aligned with the base, and they look okay once you get it installed because these just kind of look like planters or something below the front windows. And the way I got these glued down is I just placed the church on the base where I wanted it to stay, and I put this piece behind the church and these two pieces right underneath the two front windows. Then I went ahead and cut out the pews and installed them, and you want to make sure that you're putting the church building on and off the base as you're gluing these down so they don't interfere with the tower. The front tower comes back in here a little bit, so you want to make sure you don't run into this. So as you're installing these pews, make sure you put the church on and off to get the spacing of the pews where they need to be. Here I've got the church setting on the base. You can see these are those two little cleats, and here's the cleat in the back that holds the church all aligned. Again, I did not glue the church to the base because I want to be able to get this off to change the light bulb as it fails. And here's the little process I came up with for installing lighting, and you can use whatever lighting you want. You can use dollhouse lighting or whatever. I just made my own out of a little 110 volt light bulb that I picked up from Hobby Lobby craft store. These are intended to go in the glass blocks, but basically anything you can find that won't get too hot. You want this to be a fairly cool bulb, because you don't want a lot of heat in there. Then what I did is I made this little cleat to go in the roof of the building and simply tie wrap this on, and you'll see here in a second how I attached it. Here's looking from the bottom of the church up, and the 45, let me go back. You can see on this cleat, I sanded these down at 45-degree angles on each end, so that as I pushed it up into the roof of the church, these would lay flat on the roof sides, and I just simply glued those in. Next step was I drilled a little hole right here, and I ended up having to cut this light just to make it easier, cut the wires, and then I'll put it back together as I get it done here. So I just drilled a hole here at the top of the church, and I made the hole at the top simply to keep it out of the way from when you're viewing the interior of the church from the front window. I wanted this all nice and tucked up in there real high. Here is the finished church, minus the clock. Here's the base, of course the wiring for the light, and all you do is simply set this church over on in front of this cleat and behind these two cleats, and you have a completed project with the clock installed. Fairly easy project to cut, no real difficult pieces to cut out. So I hope you like this project, and these are just some tips for putting it together. And if you have any questions, just drop me an email, and we'll see you next time here at the Scrollsaw Workshop.